Welcome back. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who is on a week-long official tour to India, visited Amritsar in Punjab today. He met with the State Chief Minister, Captain Amrinder Singh. On the agenda was the alleged sympathetic view of the Khalistan separatist movement in Canada.
I raised the issue of Khalistan because that is our primary issue. There is money coming from various countries, including Canada, to Punjab to create this ruckus, and the Prime Minister is aware of it, and he's told me that he's going to look into this, and they believe in a united India, and they will not allow anything to go which will come between us to create these problems.
Soon after landing in Amritsar, Justin Trudeau and his family paid obeisance at the holiest of Sikh shrines, the Golden Temple. On Tuesday, he visited India's financial hub Mumbai and met business leaders and Bollywood celebrities. This is Mr. Trudeau's first state visit to India. He'll meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the 23rd of February for bilateral talks. His popularity at home may be on a steady downward curve, but the Canadian Prime Minister and his family are certainly laying on their brand of photogenic charm offensive thousands of kilometers away here in India. Senior foreign editor Padma Rao takes a look at the Trudeau's passage through India.
Their clothes have been matched to the occasion, pale pastels for soothing contrast against the grandeur of India's monuments. Blinding yellow and orange for a visit to a temple as a somewhat gaudy homage to what Canada's media calls India's quote-unquote Hindu nationalist government. Startling bling for a meeting with Bollywood stars, and the most obvious of all, a patka on Monsieur Trudeau's head, a chunni on Madame's, ahead of visiting the Golden Temple in Amritsar. And it is indeed this leg of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's week-long India trip that will have been watched the most. The Sikh community in Canada is the largest among all Indian Canadians. There are 500,000 Sikhs in Canada. But, and this is what India's reported cold shoulder to the visiting Prime Minister is all about, some Canadian Sikhs nurture an ambition to carve out a part of India for their own mythical country. Mr. Trudeau is a liberal, and like any Western liberal, the Canadian Prime Minister nurtures impractical and romanticized ideas about countries far away. It's the old story that plays itself out across Europe too. Another country's terrorist is their freedom fighter and welcomed and given political asylum. But Mr. Trudeau was only a boy when terrible scenes played out in faraway India. First, the controversial Operation Blue Star, the military exercise to flush out terrorists from the Sikhs' holiest shrine, the Golden Temple. Then the terrible massacre of thousands of innocent Sikh men, women and children on the heels of the assassination of India's then Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was barely a teenager then, when Delhi was awash with blood. Ironically, instigated by India's Congress Party's own members, the only Indian party currently in the opposition that could, if at all, be likened to the brand of left-of-centre ideology espoused by Mr. Trudeau's Liberal Party in Canada. And then there's the small matter of the Sikhs in Prime Minister Trudeau's own cabinet. Punjab Chief Minister Amrinder Singh once refused to meet with Canada's Defence Minister, a Sikh, claiming that the latter was a vociferous supporter of Sikh separatism. Chief Minister Singh did meet with Prime Minister Trudeau in Amritsar, and here's what the Chief of the Punjab government had to say.
आज Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau साहब से, and जो हम सोच रहे थे कि हम उनके साथ करेंगे regarding trade and agriculture में वगैरह, वो बहुत positive उन्होंने response दिया है, and I hope इसको हम आगे लेके जाएंगे.
Earlier, and sensing the Canadian media's derision of the Prime Minister's quote-unquote week-long family holiday in India and the obvious snub by the Indian government, New Delhi hastened to explain away the cold shoulder as routine protocol. Still, everyone in Canada and India knows that when leaders of a country choose to set a signal of a visitor's importance, they do abandon protocol and make it to the airport themselves. PM Trudeau too chose his words carefully and stressed the importance of a united India. Canada is wooing India's giant markets, not the other way round, so Mr. Trudeau's words would have evoked a few grins in the corridors of South Block. Still, all is not lost for the Trudeaus, at least in India. PM Trudeau's exaltation of a united India may have hardly made a major headline, but if there is one thing Bollywood-loving India loves, it's a beautiful united family. And as far as that penchant is concerned, the Trudeaus have arrived. The good-looking, affable family of 5 did all the right things. They stood at the open aircraft door with hands folded in a namaste. They reverently bathed a holy statue in a Hindu temple and mostly wore clothes that vaguely resembled Indian attire, with Mrs. Trudeau even donning a sari on one star-studded Bollywood evening. But so much for the sartorial sensitivities displayed by the Trudeaus. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau still faces his most important meetings, those with his Indian counterpart, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and government officials in New Delhi. Whatever may be the outcome of those bilateral talks, the Trudeau family's huge popularity across the gamut of India's regular and social media will certainly linger in India's institutional memory for a long time to come. Padma Rao, WION.
Well, the Trudeaus seem born for the flashlights. They have ready smiles, easygoing dispositions, and lots of good looks. But there's one little Trudeau who has India cooing and gushing even more than his famously handsome father, the littlest son of the Prime Minister, Hadrian Trudeau. Padma Rao once again taking a look at the little hero as he traverses India.
Hadrian, with an A, was the 14th emperor of ancient Rome and was known for his building projects, especially a wall that he constructed in Britain. Hadrian, with an E, is all of 3 years old but is already helping his father, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, mend many damaged fences between Canada and India. He stood at the top of the aircraft steps with his podgy little fingers folded in a namaste. Then, and feeling all grown up, he came down those steps all by himself, one at a time, only to be handed a bouquet about his size, toddled towards the waiting cameras and straight into 1.2 billion hearts across India. Hadrian gave an elephant a fruit bigger than his tiny palms. He leaped off that famous marble bench in front of the Taj Mahal. He skipped straight towards his dad to be lofted in the air and slayed it in his tiny kurta and pajama as he bounced through the Akshardham temple. Little Hadrian has for long been his father's secret weapon against aggressive journalists or combative opposition politicians. Bring the little fellow on and voila, there's always a meltdown of tough positions and a collective sigh of delight. Even as the Canadian Prime Minister heads to his most important rendezvous in India yet, that with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he may want to take a bodyguard along, a pint-sized puppet who melts hearts wherever he goes. Padma Rao, WION.
Now, Indian film star Kamal Haasan today formally announced his entry into mainstream politics. Haasan has named his party Makkal Nidhi Mayyam, which roughly translates to Centre for People's Justice. He launched the party before a packed audience in Madurai in Tamil Nadu. Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal was in attendance, so were some other leaders. Earlier today, Haasan paid a visit to the house of former President APJ Abdul Kalam in Rameshwaram, also in Tamil Nadu, to meet with the former president's elder brother and to seek his blessings. Haasan wants to contest state elections in Tamil Nadu, which has been witnessing a political vacuum after the death of former Chief Minister J.J. Lalitha. Tamil film superstar Rajinikanth has also announced his entry into politics. He did that last year. He's going to be contesting the upcoming assembly elections next year alongside Kamal Haasan.
இது உங்களுக்காக ஆன கட்சி, மக்களுக்காக. நான் உங்கள் கருவி, உங்கள் தலைவன் அல்ல. இந்த கூட்டம், இந்த மக்கள் கட்சியின் பெயர் கேளுங்கள், அமைதியாக கேளுங்கள், சொல்லுகின்றேன். இந்த கட்சியின் பெயர் மக்கள் நீதி மையம்.
French President Emmanuel Macron has vowed to reintroduce compulsory military service in his country nearly 2 decades after it was scrapped. The pledge to bring back conscription was a part of President Macron's campaign promise. He had said that restoring compulsory service in the military would inspire patriotism and social cohesion. Macron plans to put at least 600,000 young people every year through military training, and they will be required to spend at least a month with the country's armed forces. But this pledge has divided the cabinet. Defence Minister Florence Parly, for one, saying that the policy would probably not oblige young people to join the army. It won't be compulsory, but she was overruled later by a spokesperson for the French president. A trial run of this proposed policy is scheduled for 2019, that's next year, but the Macron government still hasn't given any clarity on the exact nature of the service. France has been one of the pioneers of compulsory military service, also known as conscription. During the French Revolution, remember, the then administrators had introduced compulsory service as a requirement for citizenship. But by the second half of the 20th century, the French began scaling it back. The practice was phased out between 1996 and 2001. Greece, Finland, Russia and Israel have similar practices. Sweden, which had abolished the practice in 2010, restored it in 2017 as tensions peaked in the Baltic Sea region. So France probably will be the next on that list. Indians living in America are starting to flex their political muscle. A growing number of Indian Americans are jumping into races for US Congress that begin in late March. That's next month. There's a lot at stake. The elections could either provide much more support for President Donald Trump or much more opposition to him and his policies. And WION correspondent Andy Roskin found out that Indian Americans do not have just one voice when it comes to politics.
There are 535 members of the U.S. Congress. Only 5 are Indian Americans, which is actually a record high. And all of them, like Representative Raja Krishnamurthy of suburban Chicago, are members of the more liberal Democratic Party. But all that may be changing. At least 14 Indian Americans are now running for U.S. Congress this year. They are a mix of both Republicans and Democrats. And they are proving that, in many ways, Indian Americans are just as divided as the rest of the country.
I do think that the Indian American community, like others, is not monolithic. It's going to have a diversity of viewpoints, a diversity of political affiliations, and so forth. And I welcome that.
In Krishnamurthy's district, northwest of downtown Chicago, there are not 1 but 2 Republican Indian Americans challenging him for his seat. One is Republican Jatindra Digna Walker, an Indian-born businessman, and the other is Republican Vandana Jingan, who is the candidate from the Republican Hindu Coalition, or RHC. The RHC, founded by businessman Shalabh Kumar in 2015, is a fierce supporter of President Donald Trump and takes some credit for his election. The RHC declined to talk with us about this race, but in the past, they have told us that they are focused on getting better trade deals between the U.S. and India, which they say provide more jobs for both countries. And they believe illegal immigration into the U.S. is hurting the legal immigration by Indians. And they say Indian Americans more closely align with the Republican Party, both in terms of social conservatism and fiscal conservatism. And they say President Trump embodies all those ideals with his policies. But while they proudly wear their support for Trump, Representative Krishnamurthy hangs that support around them like a dead weight, particularly on the topic of H-1B visas. The Trump administration has proposed cutting extensions on H-1B visas, which could force as many as 500,000 predominantly skilled Indian workers to leave the U.S. while they wait for their green cards.
The president wants to send them home. It hurt all of us, whether you were from India or whether you were born here. And so that's absolutely the wrong way to go. And I can't understand how any Indian American would ever vote for that policy, because that's what you vote for when you support this president.
As a physician and successful entrepreneur, I'm running for Congress to bring real-world experience and common sense to D.C.
And then there is Dr. Sapan Shah, who is running for Congress, also as a Republican, but in a different suburban Chicago district, and not affiliated with the RHC. His district has been fairly split in recent years between Republican and Democratic leadership, and he's keeping President Trump a bit at arm's length.
President Trump is the president, and I'm working in the 10th District to be hired by the people of the 10th District to represent their interests. America has given us so many opportunities we couldn't have imagined anywhere else. I'm not going to be a career politician. I commit to serving no more than 6 years and then moving out of the way for the next citizen legislator. Join me in bringing common sense to Washington.
But Trump is the leader of Shah's Republican Party, and Shah has a quick response for people who ask him about that.
I think it's that type of litmus test approach that's probably not helpful in our politics. I mean, our politics are about trying to come to consensus on things we can agree on.
Shah, who was born in the Chicago area to parents who grew up in Gujarat State, calls himself a moderate on social issues, but a conservative on fiscal issues. He says as Indian Americans have become more successful in American businesses and entrepreneurship in recent years, it's not surprising they've gotten more politically active.
Certainly issues that face businesses that I'm concerned about, issues like taxes that I'm concerned about, are things that Indian Americans are facing every single day because of their penetration in business, because of their penetration professionally.
And which party do average Indian Americans around Chicago support?
I fall, let's say, Democratic mostly.
Some friends are more Republicans.
We found one man who says Indians by nature support the values of the Republican Party. However,
when I got my citizenship, the first party that approached me was Democratic people. Republican, unfortunately, they are nice people, but they never ever approach newcomers and give them the kind of welcome.
If either Jitendra Digna Walker or Vandana Jingan win the Republican primary in late March, they will face Representative Krishnamurthy in November. And that will mark the first time in American history that two Indian Americans will face each other in a general election for Congress. And regardless of which side they are on, that alone is a big step for Indian Americans in U.S. politics. Andy Roach in Chicago for WION.